Hello and welcome to Rolling in Millimeters, or Mils, and today we have Richard Linklater's 2014 epic Boyhood. Now, this film cops a lot of shit. It's very, very divisive. People seem to either absolutely love this film, kind of infamously. Metacritic gave this film a pure 100 out of 100 score straight out of the gates, and as far as I'm aware, that has never been done for any other film in history for them, and there are only something like 11 other films in existence, according to them, that are a 100 out of 100. So obviously, regardless of how good the actual film is, it's kind of important to talk about it from that regard, plus the whole deal of it getting a Criterion release, which I strongly disagree with, and I won't actually go into in this video. I'll go into it in another one later on. But the other kind of larger crowd hate this film. They claim it's dumb, it's boring, it has no plot. They're basically the main criticisms I hear. They feel like the whole shooting the film across 12 years thing is a gimmick. They feel like it's terrible, it's plotless, it's bland, and they despise it. And I feel like I don't really fall into either of these films. I actually didn't see this when it came out, surprisingly, even though I heard, mass acclaim and mass hate for it, but I just didn't end up catching it. I just didn't really care. And, after seeing it, it's just really, it's pretty average. It really doesn't stick out to me as the glorious masterpiece that people herald it to be, but at the same time, I can't really despise it. I mean, the only films I really strongly with a passion hate are ones that are offensive on a creative level, like really offensive and very distasteful creatively. I don't mean distasteful in terms of like gore or nudity or something like that, because that can be done tastefully, if you know what I mean. I think Tarantino is kind of a good example of that, where he's very schlocky, but he does it very well. The main stuff that kind of really offends me creatively, it would be something like Beyond the Black Rainbow. I think it's just a pretentious mess, and it's just such a waste of time forcing you to sit there for, it's like hour 50 runtime. I think it's just terrible. But with something like this, yeah, it is almost 3 hours, like 2 hours 45, and it definitely does feel its runtime. When I just got done with it, I was like, okay, that just wasn't particularly good, but I mean, I don't like despise this film or anything. I actually do agree with both sides of that like love-hate dichotomy, where I do think that the whole like shooting it over 12 years thing is 100% a gimmick. But the thing is that gimmicks can actually be handled very well and don't necessarily have to feel gimmicky. Films generally going to get pitched, and the reason they have gimmicks is because you go, oh, my film's this, but it's got, this little thing to it. Hey, it's this story about a kid growing up, but it's shot across, 12 years. Like, that's the thing, that's the draw. My main issue is that it doesn't really do anything with it. All it does is go, whoa, we shot this across 12 years. That's cool, isn't it? Like, you got to actually do something aesthetically with it or story-wise with it, and that's basically going to be the bulk of this review. My main issue with the film is just that it's just that. I don't think the gimmick works with the way that they've constructed the film or the way that Linklater's constructed the film, and to be honest, there isn't really much else to talk about besides that on a like technical level or a creative level, because the film is so heavily focused on that gimmick, and that's my main issue. It's just a one-trick pony, and that's the only thing it is. The only thing that holds this entire film together is that gimmick. Like, the film is pretty visually bland. The actual Blu-ray copy that I saw of this does look really nice, like the image quality is nice, which also, going back to the Criterion release thing, makes me wonder why there needs to be a Criterion release of this film. Like, hey, the image quality is amazing, doesn't need to be restored, doesn't need to be bumped up to like 4K or anything, it's fine as it is. Like, there are some okay shots in the beginning, and it's not like terrible or anything, but it just really doesn't stand out at all. It looks very plain. On top of that, soundtrack is pretty poor / non-existent. Same with the sound mixing. Basically the same with every technical aspect of this film. It just doesn't stand out at all. It's a very bland film aesthetically. It means that there's such a heavy focus on the acting and the writing and the whole 12 years gimmick. But the issue is that the writing for the most part is terrible and or just spontaneous improv stuff, or at least that's how it feels. And considering Linklater's other films like the Before trilogy, where he uses a lot of spontaneous dialogue and also to actually like great effect there, here it's pretty bad. I mean, there's not really much going on. The character writing is non-existent because you're just having improv scenes, and my main issue is that we really don't get to know this main character, this main boy Mason, until maybe when he's like 13 or 14, which is like an hour and a half into the film, and by that time it's way, way, way too late. Plus, I mean, the performances from like Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette are pretty good, but they're not really in the film a huge amount, especially Ethan Hawke. And plus, I mean, like, if you're completely focusing the attention of your film almost purely on the writing and the acting, I mean, they really have to carry the film. And we're considering that this is a 2-hour 48 runtime. I just don't think that's really possible. Funnily enough, Richard Linklater has actually done this before in Before Sunrise, where the whole focus of that film, again, is on Ethan Hawke. It's on the writing, it's on the character acting, it's on the chemistry between the two main characters, and for the most part, it really succeeds at that. And I actually really like that film quite a bit. The thing is that that film's also like an hour 40. It doesn't have to carry this like grand epic story. And, you know, when I also think grand, epic, 12-year, boyhood rising to adulthood story, I think that they actually should have scripted a major part of that. And I'll kind of go into that a bit later, where I think they actually wasted that 12-year shooting opportunity. But I know why they did it creatively, and that kind of creative decision that they've made is what I'll be talking about for the bulk of this review. Okay, so the whole kind of theme of this film here, and I'm not going to be spoiling a huge amount, but I'm going to be touching on some kind of later scenes. But the thing is that there's not really any specific scenes I need to reference, There's like one that I'll talk about where a line comes from, and it is actually like an okay scene. But usually when I do these reviews, I kind of go, oh, well, I like, the cinematography here, and then I might show a clip. But it all of this stuff just kind of, it all just blends together. And that's another issue, is the film is really blandly shot. Like I was saying before, the actual visual design of it is very poor, but the fact is that every single shot just goes back to camera A, camera B, shot, reverse shot, characters' faces, and it's just like, you can't keep that up for like, almost 3 hours, and especially with characters that you just don't care about, and dialogue that is so pretentious. I mean, like, in Before Sunrise, Linklater's stonerisms and kind of liberalisms, and if you've seen his films, you'll know exactly what I mean. His kind of like edgy, I've just read Thus Spoke Zarathustra and I'm like tipping my fedora at you tier, like nihilistic, pessimistic comments, generally channeled through Ethan Hawke in that film. But they're kind of tolerable, and funnily enough, I'm not sure if he realized, but he was kind of poking fun at himself, where Ethan Hawke's meant to be like a bit of an arrogant kind of douche, but at the same time he's like actually kind of an okay guy. So when those sorts of comments come out, I actually thought it was really great writing, because it was just Ethan Hawke being a bit of an edgelord. But for the most part, that film has like pretty interesting dialogue. It's nothing like ultra groundbreaking, but it's really a really great character piece, basically. But here in Boyhood, it's like, man, the dialogue, it's pretty bad. Like, I know you're dealing with this like 15-year-old kid or whatever for the most part, but like far out, some of the lines in this film are so cringeworthy. And it wouldn't be a huge issue if it did feel like it was in character, but for the most part, it just feels like Linklater is just channeling his voice straight through and basically just speaking directly to the audience and just kind of telling them what to think. And it's just, oh man, it's pretty painful to listen to. But regardless, I kind of sidetracked myself there for a second. My main issue with this kind of like 12-year gimmick and this whole theme that the film has of like, we are just showing life. We don't need to have a plot. In real life, people don't have these like very simple 90-minute arcs. It's just like, you're just growing up, man. And it's like, okay, like at the surface, that's a pretty dumb stoner idea of like, man, let's just like fucking shoot a film across like 12 years and it doesn't even have to have a plot, man. It's just about life. And funnily enough, Ethan Hawke even has a very similar idea in Before Sunrise, where he wants to have this show where every day someone around the world takes like a 24-hour video of their life and then that gets aired. And it's like, okay, that's an interesting art project. Probably isn't particularly interesting to watch, which is why Boyhood also isn't particularly interesting to watch. But I do admire that the film kind of came from this impetus of like, hey, we want to do like, we're just showing life and we'll show across like 12 years and we'll shoot across 12 years and we'll get the same actors back. And it's like, okay, that's a pretty cool concept. What are you going to do with that? And my main issue is that it doesn't do anything with that aesthetically, and you can't just kind of stop at that idea stage. Or more accurately, if you're going to do an idea like that, it has to fit, the structure of the film, or the aesthetics of the film. And funnily enough, I kind of have like the perfect example of this. Basically, Bela Tarr's film Southern Tango has this very, very similar idea of like, we're going to show the, you know, monotony of life. We're kind of going to show like life in full. It's very, very dull. It's repetitive. It has all this like sorrow to it. And you know, that's yet again an interesting concept to start off with, but it's like, okay, where do you go with that? But the thing is that Bela Tarr actually does something with that. He goes, okay, so my film's kind of about the repetitiveness of life. So how about I make the music really, really repetitive, very, very strained, electronic, very strange, and kind of alien, almost like a kind of like Tarkovsky Stalker-esque sound design to it. And he goes, okay, it's all about kind of life being very, very depressing and meaningless. So I'm going to make it black and white and very like kind of grainy, stark imagery. Then I'm also going to have very, very long average shot length, you know, some shots lasting like 5 to 10 minutes, lots of tracking, lots of fluidity, and then also lots of like very static shots of just characters not doing a huge amount. And on top of that, the film is almost 8 hours long. So you get to really fully, and you're meant to watch this in one sitting, which I have twice. I would highly recommend it to anyone seriously interested in film. It is truly a kind of one-of-a-kind experience, even compared to other really, really long films like Berlin Alexanderplatz or like Out One, where they're kind of episodic. This is just one big, long film. And finally, it actually has a plot. It has characters that are established. It has arcs. Yes, it is about like the meaningless of life and kind of meandering and this repetitiveness, but over 8 hours, it does have a very simple yet exceedingly like convoluted and not explained plot, which kind of gives you this sensation of like something big is going on, but you don't really know what it is, which is also kind of like another element of life, I guess. So the difference basically is that Bela Tarr and, you know, Linklater have like similar ideas. I'm not saying that they're exactly the same, but the thing is that Bela Tarr creates this whole and very, very unique aesthetic to the whole film, and he makes it into like an art piece. Like regardless if you find the film boring or you don't like it, you have to admit that he does take all of these creative elements and really kind of shift them in line with the themes of the film and his vision as a whole. But the thing with Linklater is that he just kind of goes, well, I want to shoot it across 12 years, and I just want it to be about like a kid growing up. There's no like overarching story because the story is just his life. But then he just fits it into this really like bland and plain American film aesthetic, not even like an American art house film. And I mean, like, yet again, it works for Before Sunrise because Before Sunrise has interesting characters. You learn more about them as they go on, and, you know, the interactions are interesting. And it's a relatively short film, you know. Plus, it actually has a narrative drive to it, albeit a very, very loose one, where they're like, hey, are we going to see each other again? How is this going to work? You know, what's happening with your life? What's happening with my life? What's happening with this? How's our relationship going to develop? Boyhood tries to have it both ways by having this pretty experimental, overarching idea of like, okay, we're not going to basically have a plot at all, because it's just going to be about this kid's life. We're just going to shoot this kid actually growing up. A lot of it's going to be impromptu. It's going to be very like naturalistic acting. We're going to have lots of references like to the time for like nostalgia in the future, and then, you know, we're all just going to like cobble together and it'll just be like a pure depiction of life. And it's like, okay, like, that's an interesting idea, so how do you turn that into a film? And the thing is that Boyhood basically stops there, because all it does is take that, like, honestly pretty experimental idea and then just put it into a really, really bland American film. Like I was saying, there's nothing particularly creative about any of the visuals, any of the structure, besides the structure literally just being this kid growing up before your eyes, which I will admit is a very, very cool effect, but it's not like it's something we can't just do with CGI. I know that's kind of a cop-out, but I mean, sometimes in filmmaking you have to go, okay, what's easier? Do we use CGI here? Or do we, you know, shoot the film across 12 years? And I would say just CGI it and instead actually spend 12 years writing a good script instead of just shooting this naturalistic nothing. The fact is that this film, unlike Southern Tango, does nothing experimental with its aesthetic, which it really, really needed to do for an idea that is as like experimental and boundary defying as we're not going to have a plot. You know, we're just going to shoot this impromptu. We're just going to shoot this across 12 years. You really need to experiment in all fields fields and adapt in all fields. You can't just go, oh, it's going to be fine, we're just going to shoot this like a regular film and then just have this like crazy gimmick to it. It just doesn't work. And the thing is that Sutton Tongo rides with the idea and goes, you want a film about like how long life is and how meaningless it is and how repetitive it is. How about we make this film 8 hours long with lots of very, very drab, dark, very like some seriously depressing overtones to this film. It's going to be really, really slow and extremely bleak with these kind of like absurd tinges of comedy kind of intermixed with it. And it just grabs that idea by the horns and just rides off with it to like experimentation town. And all Boyhood does is just kind of like smoke a little dank and then just sit in a room thinking about how cool it is and then not do anything with the idea. I think the idea of shooting across 12 years for a film with the same actors and seeing them grow and develop is a cool concept. I think you do some really, really interesting stuff with it. And I think Linklater himself has done interesting stuff with this, like with the Before trilogy, where you get to see Ethan Hawke's character grow over, 20 years. And it's interesting because he actually has a personality. Whereas Mason, the main character in this film, I don't know who he is. We're never really like formally introduced to him because it's just him living his life. And I kind of was like, okay, maybe, throughout the film we'll kind of learn more things about him on a personality basis. But the issue is that he has this syndrome, and I'm actually not sure what the term for this in writing is, but it's where the character isn't really a character, but they're just defined by what they do rather than who they are. So for example, you might have a character who is a soldier, but they don't really have a personality. All they are is just, I am a soldier. I'm going to do this and this and this. And I feel like Mason's the same with his photography thing. He's like, oh, I'm a photography student. I'm very, very liberal and loose. But, for following this kid for nearly 3 hours and, across 12 years of his life, and they really had, 12 years to play with the script, 12 years to play with this actor, to play with this character, there's seriously less development than some side characters I've seen in fictional films that last for like 80 minutes. It's pretty pathetic. On top of that, his acting isn't like terrible, but it really isn't very good. And I guess that's the risk you run when you pick an actor when they're like 6 or 7 years old and then have to shoot with them until they're 19. How does that work? How do you pick a good actor at age 6 besides the Harry Potter films, I guess? But I think they kind of lucked out a little bit. Why couldn't we have had like a Goodfellas style rise and then, fall from power story across 12 years, where it was this really, really engaging, kind of visually complex script that was very, very tight. And the thing is that, over the 12 years, they only shot for like 45 days. Why couldn't we have just spent 45 days across 12 years with, Linklater's cast of actors, who of course he uses in Boyhood, like with Ethan Hawke, and then you made a really, really interesting film that functions on its own. Plus, it has that really, really interesting gimmick to it where you see people age before your eyes. And on that topic, my other main issue is people are like, this is groundbreaking, no one's ever done this before. True, no one's ever really done 12 years per se for a fictional film, but like, have you heard of the Up series? Like, those guys started in like the mid-60s and have been going for like 50 years. It really isn't like a groundbreaking concept at all. And I feel like for the most part, CGI is a cop-out, but here it really wouldn't have made that much of a difference. The only benefit is that that they actually shot it across 12 years, which that does a little bit for me, but if I knew that the film could be exponentially better and I wouldn't have that sensation, I'd take a better film over just having a gimmick like this. And plus, I think I mentioned this before, Linklater's like liberal stonerisms are borderline unbearable in this film. And politics aside, the writing here is just poor. The way he writes these characters is just poor, and it's so evidently just him speaking through these characters. And the reason why that's poor writing is these characters are saying things that they wouldn't normally say, and they're all speaking like Richard Linklater characters. And having like a personal touch to your characters as a writer is a benefit, but you shouldn't literally just be writing your own words, to speak through these people as your vessels or something. And there's one scene where it's like during the Obama election era, and Mason is like knocking on this guy's door asking if he can put like an Obama sign on his lawn, and this like fat old white dude comes out, and I think possibly even with a shotgun, and he stands in front of a Confederate flag in his backyard and says, hey, I wouldn't want to elect like Barack Hussein Osama, and if you don't get off my lawn, I'm going to shoot you. And I'm like, that's just like the most ridiculously simplistic depiction of a conservative that it's just like, yet again, politics aside, it's just poor writing. It isn't for a film that is so focused on naturalism and realism, not a particularly naturalistic or realistic depiction of someone like that. Plus, I absolutely despise the constant nostalgia bait references to things in the past, particularly technology. It's like, whoa, Mason's playing on a Game Boy. Whoa, he's got a Wii. Whoa, it's like references to the 90s, man. And it's like, okay, like I grew up during that time. It doesn't fucking do anything for me. It's like the fucking equivalent of like a BuzzFeed article like, hey, do you guys remember this thing? Do you guys remember the Game Boy Color? That was crazy. That's basically like a major part of Mason's childhood depicted in this film is just nostalgia bait intermingled with, yet again, more Linklaterisms. I haven't even mentioned how like self-insert part of this film feel, especially with like the succession of like drunken stepfather figures and the absence of a father. And yet again, this is present in Before Sunrise, where Ethan Hawke's character isn't really like particularly attached to his father and kind of talks down about him. And it's just like, it feels like fan fiction where he's like writing himself as this like really cool like artsy character, and he's like above everyone, and all his abusive alcoholic fathers are like these old guys, and one of them is like ex-military. Oh, it's just dreadful writing. In saying that, I do kind of like the opening of this film. Maybe like the first 35 minutes are pretty nice. I kind of like the flow of them. It really kind of got me engaged, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be cool. This is very naturalistic. But there was a point about 2 hours in where I felt like the film was going to end, and then I realized that there were like, 45 plus minutes to go, and I was like, okay. And I feel like my score would be a little higher if it kind of stopped at that point, because I feel like it would have been at least tolerable. But just that last 45-minute stretch is also particularly bad in terms of liberalisms. One of the final lines of the film, I think Mason says something like, it's not that we like seize the moment, it's like the moment seizes us. Like, fuck, man, like, can you write like worse dialogue? And to be fair, I think the character's like tripping on shrooms on like a weed brownie or something, but I mean, like, no, just don't ever say that again. I'm giving this a pretty begrudging 55. I mean, I've been very, very harsh on this in parts, but honestly, it just isn't really anything. I think the performances are pretty nice. There are some okay scenes, and the only one that really stands out is where, Patricia Arquette basically explains the themes of the film and is like, I got married to these two guys, I did this, I'm like 50. The next thing that's going to happen is, it's going to be me at my funeral. I thought there'd be more to life. And it's like, hey guys, this is what the film's about. Take the notes down. That's like, probably my favorite scene in the film. But for the most part, it's just like dumb, pretty boring drama scenes with characters you don't really know or care about. And that's basically it. It's a shame. So those are my thoughts on it. I think I've been like relatively fair with it. I don't think I was like particularly diatribic or acerbic towards this film, but yeah, you can check my other stuff down there. I mentioned that Bela Tarr video essay. If you didn't watch that then, watch that now. That's probably like my favorite thing that I've made so far YouTube wise. I'm pretty happy with that, and yeah, that's it. I'm pretty sad that this film kind of sucked, but au revoir.